Somewhere right now, a healthy adult man is sitting on a couch, not because he is lazy, but because the math stopped working. That couch has become an unfairly popular villain in an economic story considerably more complicated than furniture alone. Headlines love blaming video games, blaming laziness, blaming an entire generation of men who supposedly lost their ambition. Those headlines rarely mention manufacturing collapse, automation, or the actual research economists have quietly published for years. Why men don't want to work anymore is not really a mystery. It is actually a fully documented economic and social shift. The data has existed for years, patiently waiting in academic papers nobody reads until a headline finally rediscovers it. This is the Wealth Records, where every video changes how you see money, history, and the systems controlling your life. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe, because this particular topic gets uncomfortable fairly quickly, honestly. Somewhere a comment section is already heating up, and we have not even reached the actual statistics yet. That reaction alone tells you something. This topic touches a nerve considerably more sensitive than most economic subjects. Let's start with the actual numbers, since this trend is measured extensively, repeatedly across several developed economies. Numbers do not care about internet arguments, they simply sit there, quietly accurate, waiting patiently to be actually read. Prime working age male labor force participation has declined steadily across many developed economies over recent decades. In the United States specifically, the share of prime age men either working or actively seeking work has fallen considerably. That decline has continued gradually for decades, largely independent of whichever political party happened to be in charge. Somewhere, a politician takes credit for a temporary uptick, conveniently ignoring the considerably longer, less flattering trendline. This is not a sudden crisis. It is a slow, quiet erosion that headlines only rediscover every few years, dramatically, briefly. The first real factor is the collapse of manufacturing. Historically, one of the largest employers of working age men specifically. Manufacturing employment has declined significantly across multiple developed economies due to automation and global trade shifts. These jobs paid reasonably well, required no advanced degree, and offered genuine dignity through visible, tangible daily output. A man could build something, see it leave the factory, and feel a version of pride considerably harder to replicate elsewhere. Somewhere, a factory closes, offering workers a retraining pamphlet instead of anything resembling comparable replacement employment. Retraining programs sound wonderful on a government press release, considerably less wonderful when you are actually 50 years old. Learning an entirely new trade at 50 is considerably harder than the pamphlet's cheerful font suggests it should be. The second real factor is automation specifically, since machines increasingly perform tasks once requiring considerable physical labor. Robotics and automation have displaced considerable manufacturing and warehouse labor previously performed almost exclusively by men. Warehouses now feature robotic pickers moving faster and complaining considerably less than any previous human employee ever did. A robot does not get tired, does not demand a raise, and does not require health insurance or an occasional bathroom break. That efficiency looks fantastic on a shareholder report and considerably less fantastic on an unemployment application form. Nobody has ever seen a robot fill out an unemployment form, mostly because robots rarely qualify for benefits. The third real factor involves education. Since the labor market increasingly rewards credentials, men are earning less frequently. Women now outnumber men in college enrollment and completion rates across most developed economies, a genuinely significant shift. This is not framed as a problem for women. It is framed as evidence men are adapting more slowly to a changing labor market. Somewhere, a young man decides college feels pointless, then discovers considerably fewer high-paying options without one available. That decision, made at 18, quietly shapes an entire earning trajectory for several subsequent decades afterward. The fourth real factor is the service economy shift, since many replacement jobs now sit in sectors traditionally dominated by women. Healthcare, education, and caregiving roles have expanded considerably, while manufacturing and construction roles have contracted instead. Men have been statistically slower to enter these expanding sectors, partly due to cultural expectations around masculinity and identity. Nobody handed young boys a career brochure featuring nursing or elementary teaching as an equally respected default option. A man raised to associate work with physical output sometimes struggles psychologically transitioning into caregiving or service roles. That struggle is not weakness. It is a genuine identity mismatch between how a generation was raised and how the economy actually shifted. Nobody handed out a manual explaining how to feel proud sorting inventory instead of assembling something visible and tangible. The fifth real factor involves disability and health, since disability claims among working age men have risen considerably over decades. Chronic pain, mental health conditions, and previous workplace injuries increasingly prevent men from returning to available employment. Economists studying this trend have linked rising disability rates directly to the disappearance of physically demanding manufacturing jobs. The body remembers decades of manual labor considerably longer than any pension plan ever remembered to actually reward it properly. A man with a bad back could once still work reasonably well on an assembly line, considerably less easily behind a modern service counter. Standing all day smiling at customers requires a genuinely different kind of stamina than an old assembly line ever demanded. The sixth real factor is genuinely darker, involving what researchers have specifically termed deaths of despair among working age men. Substance abuse, alcohol-related illness, and suicide rates have all risen significantly among working age men without a college degree. These are not abstract statistics. They represent real families quietly grieving losses that rarely make national headlines. Researchers Ann Case and Angus Deaton documented this pattern extensively, linking economic dislocation directly to declining physical health. This is not a convenient political talking point. It is a measured, peer-reviewed, genuinely alarming demographic health trend. That research earned considerable academic recognition, specifically because the pattern proved remarkably difficult to dismiss. The seventh real factor involves purpose itself, since work historically provided men considerably more than simply a monthly paycheck. Work provided identity, routine, social connection, and a culturally reinforced sense of contribution difficult to replace elsewhere easily. Remove that structure, and many men report struggling considerably with purpose, routine, and a persistent, quiet sense of directionless drift. Somewhere, a man loses his job and discovers, uncomfortably, that his entire social circle existed exclusively through that workplace. Weekend plans, lunch conversations, and even friendships all quietly disappear alongside the actual paycheck itself. The eighth real factor involves changing family dynamics, since dual-income households have become considerably more common and necessary. Traditional breadwinner expectations placed enormous psychological weight on men specifically being the primary or sole household earner. As that expectation shifted, some men report feeling considerably less essential within their own household's financial structure overall. This does not mean families stopped valuing men. It means the specific role men were raised to expect has genuinely, measurably changed. That distinction matters enormously, since feeling less essential and actually being unwanted are two completely different experiences entirely. Surveys suggest many men still feel deep pressure to provide financially, even as that pressure has become considerably less exclusive. Somewhere, a father works fewer hours than his own father did, yet somehow feels considerably guiltier about it anyway, constantly. Guilt, apparently, did not shrink alongside the actual required hours. It simply found new, creative reasons to stick around. The ninth real factor involves the gig economy specifically, since traditional stable employment increasingly fragmented into unstable alternatives. Gig work offers flexibility while frequently removing benefits, security, and the structured routine many men previously relied upon heavily. A stable factory shift provided structure automatically. A gig schedule requires constant self-motivation many people struggle maintaining. The 10th real factor involves mental health stigma specifically, since men remain statistically less likely to seek help for genuine struggles. Men report seeking mental health treatment considerably less frequently than women, despite experiencing comparable rates of underlying distress. Somewhere, a man describes himself as simply tired, when the actual underlying condition genuinely resembles clinical depression more accurately. Tired is a considerably more socially acceptable word to say out loud than the actual clinical term sitting underneath it. That stigma prevents early intervention, allowing withdrawal from work and social life to quietly compound over considerably longer periods. The 11th real factor involves video games and digital entertainment specifically, since these do provide a genuinely accessible escape. Economists have studied how affordable, immersive entertainment options have reduced some young men's motivation toward traditional employment. This is not really about laziness. It is about entertainment becoming considerably cheaper and more engaging than frustrating job searching. Somewhere, a young man logs 20 hours weekly gaming, receiving considerably more immediate feedback there than from repeated job rejections. A game rewards effort within minutes. A job application often rewards effort with silence stretching across several discouraging weeks. The 12th real factor involves the criminal justice system specifically, since incarceration rates create long-term employment barriers afterward. Formerly incarcerated men face considerable hiring discrimination, permanently reducing their labor force participation even after serving time. Somewhere, a qualified applicant gets rejected specifically because of a background check reflecting decisions made over a decade earlier. A single mistake at 22 can quietly haunt an entire job search well into someone's 40s. Decades later, still. Now, does any of this mean men are simply victims with zero personal responsibility involved in their own individual circumstances whatsoever? Not exactly, and that conclusion would honestly be a fairly lazy way to end an otherwise carefully researched economic investigation. Individual choices genuinely matter, effort genuinely matters, and personal responsibility remains a meaningful factor in individual outcomes. But individual choices happen inside a broader structural context. And that structural context has genuinely shifted considerably over decades. Blaming laziness alone ignores manufacturing collapse, automation, education gaps, health trends, and genuine identity disruption simultaneously. Blaming the system alone ignores that individual men still make choices about effort, treatment, and engagement within their own circumstances. Both explanations contain partial truth, and pretending otherwise makes for better outrage content, but considerably worse actual understanding. Outrage generates views considerably faster than nuance does, which is precisely why nuance rarely trends on any platform. So is this some deliberate societal conspiracy, engineered specifically to sideline men from meaningful economic participation deliberately? Not exactly, and honestly, no single group benefits meaningfully from millions of working-age men disengaging from the labor force entirely. Nobody needed a secret meeting. They simply needed decades of manufacturing decline, automation, and shifting education patterns compounding. Once these pressures accumulated simultaneously, withdrawal from traditional employment became a statistically predictable outcome for many men. Now let's address the family angle specifically, since this deserves genuine nuance rather than a simple, satisfying, one-sided conclusion. Some men genuinely feel unappreciated within their households, and that feeling deserves acknowledgement rather than dismissal or ridicule. Dismissing a genuine feeling rarely makes it disappear. It usually just makes the person expressing it feel considerably more unheard. Feeling unappreciated, however, usually reflects a mismatch between expectations and reality, not evidence that families actively devalue men. Most partners and families genuinely want men present, engaged, and healthy, even as the specific provider role has genuinely shifted considerably. Resentment rarely solves mismatched expectations. Communication and adapted roles genuinely tend to resolve them considerably more effectively. Nobody has ever successfully argued their way into feeling valued. That outcome tends to require actual conversation instead. Framing an entire gender as universally unappreciated risks replacing one inaccurate stereotype with an equally inaccurate one instead. The genuinely useful conversation involves updating expectations together, rather than assigning blame entirely toward one side exclusively. So what actually helps here, since ending purely on structural doom, helps absolutely nobody trying to build an actual stable life today. Retraining programs genuinely need better funding and design, connecting displaced workers directly toward growing sectors requiring labor. A pamphlet alone rarely retrains anyone. Actual funded programs with real placement support genuinely produce considerably better results. Mental health outreach specifically designed for men could meaningfully reduce the stigma, preventing earlier, more effective intervention. Workplace flexibility, applied evenly across genders, could help everyone balance caregiving responsibilities without financial or identity penalty. None of these solutions arrive quickly, and none fit neatly into a single election cycle or a single satisfying online debate. Individually, seeking purpose through community, mentorship, or new skills remains genuinely practical regardless of broader structural conditions. None of this fixes the entire structural shift single-handedly, but it does help individuals navigate genuinely difficult conditions somewhat better. Why men don't want to work anymore is really asking why work itself changed shape faster than expectations managed to adapt alongside it. The factories closed, the classroom gender gap widened, and the emotional script many men were raised on quietly stopped matching reality. That mismatch produces genuine struggle, and genuine struggle deserves genuine understanding rather than either blanket blame or blanket excuse. Neither the lazy narrative nor the pure victim narrative fully explains what millions of individual men are actually experiencing daily. Do you think this trend reflects genuine structural failure? Or does personal responsibility deserve considerably more weight in this conversation? Drop your honest answer below, since this conversation at the Wealth Records tends to get genuinely passionate every single time we ask. We read every single comment genuinely, and this particular topic tends to produce considerably longer, more thoughtful ones than usual. Tell us which specific factor, manufacturing decline, education gaps, or mental health stigma, resonates most within your own experience. If this video gave you a more complete picture than the usual headlines, hit subscribe, because we break down these systems weekly. We explain exactly how economics, policy, and social change quietly reshape ordinary lives, backed consistently by real research data. Consider this your friendly reminder that struggling is not the same as failing, no matter what an old headline insists otherwise. The Wealth Records, where the systems running your daily life finally get explained in plain, honest, refreshingly balanced language, with the receipts to back it up every single time, because outrage alone was never going to explain a genuinely complicated trend.